Welcome back, headbangers and metalheads alike. Today, I'm spinning the wax with drummer Patrick Crawford from Nite, and we're listening to a record from Jon Oliva's Pain called Maniacal Renderings. Don't go anywhere, it all starts right now. Hello and welcome back, my metal friends, to Spinning the Wax, where we listen to your favorite artists' favorite records. My name is John Garcia, aka StayPuft, the metal marshmallow, and your friendly neighborhood headbanger. One of my favorite parts about this show is not only seeing what kinds of records people bring on, but why they bring them on in the first place. Even when an album seems like it might be coming from out of nowhere, there's usually a deep and meaningful reason why the artist is just itching to bring it on and to share. And such is the case with our guest and our pick today. For episode 19 of Spinning the Wax, I'm happy to host Patrick Crawford, drummer of Nite, that's Nite, a blackened heavy metal band out of San Francisco, California, who just released their third album, Cult of the Serpent Sun, earlier this year. It is a fantastic record. Go listen to it if you haven't done so already. A perfect blend of black metal vocals over sinister and powerful 80s heavy metal. Imagine, if you will, what it would be like if Immortal had covered Iron Maiden's Somewhere in Time, and you have a pretty good idea of what Nite sounds like. In the vein of 80s heavy metal, one of Nite's biggest influences, and also one of Patrick's all-time favorite bands, are American heavy metal legends Savatage. But instead of bringing on, say, like Hall of the Mountain King or Streets, a rock opera, Patrick opted to go with what he contends, however controversially, is the long-lost Savatage record that never was, 2006's Maniacal Renderings by Jon Oliva's Pain. Congratulations if you've even heard of this record before, let alone listened to it. Patrick will get into the whole story behind the band, Jon Oliva's Pain, and the context in which Maniacal Renderings was recorded, but the short version is that this was a project that Savatage co-founder Jon Oliva had during a time when Savatage was on hiatus and after Trans-Siberian Orchestra had become huge. Supposedly, he used riffs and song ideas from his late brother that he found recorded on demo tapes, and Patrick thinks of it like a therapy album for Jon, both to process his brother's death and to feed his musical soul after hitting it big with the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. While even Patrick admits that the name of the band is a little bit hard to get past, over the years, his love for Savatage and his respect for Jon Oliva, the musician and person, has allowed him to really dig into this album to find so much to take away from it, be it musically, lyrically, or personally. He gets deep into the Savatage lore and their place in metal history, while also showing how this album is a vulnerable and humanizing piece of music to a flawed individual like Jon Oliva. Of course, we also chat about Nite, their new record, how the fact that they have an audience still blows Patrick's mind, and how you just can't take heavy metal too seriously. The fact that it's cringy and cheesy and ridiculous and theatrical is what makes it fun, and knowing all that is going to help you enjoy this record even more. Patrick also tells an incredible story about how Trans-Siberian Orchestra was almost made up of musicians from Fate's Warning instead of Savatage. If you like this video, please click like, and if you really like this video, please subscribe to the channel. We have new videos coming out every other week. Leave a comment below about Jon Oliva's Pain, Savatage, or Nite. Let me know your experience with all of them. You can also head over to Spinning the Wax on socials at Spinning the Wax, or check us out on patreon.com/spinningthewax to support the show directly. So here it is, everyone. This is episode 19 of Spinning the Wax, where Patrick Crawford of Nite listens to Maniacal Renderings by Jon Oliva's Pain. Please welcome Patrick Crawford to Spinning the Wax. Patrick, it's so good to have you. How are you doing, my friend?
Thanks for having me, John. I am doing great. Happy to be here and stoked to listen to this fucking
Yeah,
record.
yeah, dude. Yeah, we'll get into the pick in a second because it is a little like wacky out there pick, and which I love on this is the whole reason why I've like wanted to do this show, because I'm sure that as many people are gonna bring Master of Puppets on to a show, right? They're gonna bring on shit that nobody has ever either heard of or doesn't know or maybe kind of knows, but. Before we get into that, I'm
Yeah,
curious about your musical journey and stuff like that. This is the first time that we're chatting. I have talked to Van before
cool.
when Voice of the Cronian Moon came out, which a fucking incredible record. It was one of my favorite records of that year that it came
Thanks,
out.
man.
And yeah, absolutely. And that was the record that I discovered y'all on. So just
Awesome.
how and why, my first question is, how and why did you fall in love with heavy metal?
Well, speaking of Metallica,
Yeah.
I was born in the late 1970s, and
Mm,
so, I kind of came of age and got awareness of music around mid to late 80s, and definitely like Metallica was a huge part of that journey. I grew up skateboarding. I'm originally from northeastern Ohio, where there's nothing to do
yeah.
and except for drugs and alcohol and skateboarding. So those were my pastimes. I got Ride the Lightning on cassette tape, and it did not leave my little Sony Walkman for ever as an 11 or 12-year-old or whenever I first got that record. And I think from that, starting with an album like that, Metallica's such a great gateway band, especially when you're young. You can
Yeah.
go in so many different directions. Like there's thrash, but there's also like beautiful like instrumental compositions that sort of give you this ear for sort of like melody and like, oh, like what's the bass doing? Like what like it kind of like gives you this musical vocabulary that you don't even realize you're getting. So like an album like Ride the Lightning to me was like such a gift to be this like first introduction to heavy metal. And from there, like tons of thrash. I got really into the sort of like by the mid to late 90s, that sort of anarcho like punk scene, like crust, thrash, D beat, Discharge was the template for everything
Yeah, of course.
for me from like 96 to early to today. Still Discharge is a huge influence. I moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I lived from 97 to 2001.
Mm,
I played with a an anarcho punk band there called Os Rotten, who
mm.
some of your listeners may be familiar with if they're old enough. Amazing seminal band for that era. Got to tour uh, US, Europe. We did Japan for a
Fuck
month.
yeah.
It was amazing. Like for me being like a like 20-year-old kid
Yeah.
in the world, it was awesome. So yeah, and then eventually finished school in Cincinnati, Ohio. Got my degree in graphic design. I'm a graphic designer for my day job because, as
Mhm.
we all know, music does not pay the bills.
Of course.
And moved to San Francisco, Bay Area in like 2003, and I've been here since then. I've been playing drums since I was about when I right after I got the Metallica record. 11 or 12 years old, I took up the snare drum, played in the school band, which again, I think gave me an appreciation for a lot of different styles of music. I played in the jazz band. I tried to be as well-rounded as I possibly could with
That's good.
just always having, like dreams of like being on stage on a big drum riser and playing huge racks of toms and like giant cymbals hanging from chains and stuff. But
Yeah,
like,
of course.
yeah, I mean, I always tried to sort of like know what I loved, which my love was always heavy metal and
Mhm.
fast, hard, loud music. But I try to always have an appreciation for all different styles because it just you learn so much more and you become such a more well-rounded musician.
Very much so, and I wish at that age I had done that because I was one of those kids when I was like 15. Yeah, if it's not metal, it sucks. Get the fuck out of here. I don't need to take guitar lessons. Like, I don't need to
Totally.
get in the jazz ensemble or whatever. Like all that other stuff. Which nowadays it's like, oh, I wonder why I'm not as good of a musician as I wanted to be when I was a kid. But it's interesting that you say, how many. Because I was one of the people too. Who Metallica was like a big gateway band. Because I grew up, in I believe I am almost exactly 10 years younger than you. So just flip
Awesome.
another generation, right?
Yeah,
Where
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just like I was hearing new metal on the radio and like Godsmack and System of a Down, and then got really into the 2000 metalcore bands like Killswitch Engage and Shadows Fall and stuff, which has led me to At the Gates and extreme metal and everything. But
Cool.
Metallica,
Awesome.
Iron Maiden, Slayer or Metallica, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest were the big three for me as far as those like gateway bands. And I think it's interesting that you had that gateway experience with Metallica about the time that they were doing the thing, and then I was there about like 15 years later, and then now how many kids nowadays are still going through that
Totally.
gateway where it's just that Metallica is that big bang to get them elsewhere. And I just think it's so interesting about, whether someone's, 55 or someone's like 15, they could still have that basically same experience, although with their different lived experiences and stuff like that,
For sure. Not to go too deep into the Metallica realm, but like being in the Bay Area and sort of like, having one or two sort of like people removed from the Metallica camp, and like, just seeing those dudes around because they'll
Yeah.
still go to shows. And like the first Ghost tour before their record was even out, they played at like a tiny club down the street from me, and I literally like ran into James, like
Yeah.
literally like bumped into him, and I'm like,
Yeah,
I
I
was
was
like,
gonna
oh
say,
shit,
I imagine you try to get down to the venue and just, oh,
pop ahead. But like, there's something really cool about, I think, like growing up as a kid, hearing this music that seems so big and far away and otherworldly, and then it's like I moved to a place where it's like, again, like Metallica's not from here, we know, but like they're a part of the Bay Area, like, thrash metal like history, and they're that like sort of like DNA is still like very much woven into what happens here today in the music community, and to sort of be a part of that and feel the sort of like residual effects of that,
Yeah.
it's very cool. It feels like a very like it's been my experience as a musician my entire life, where like you grow up feeling like these things are so unattainable and so like out there, and like, oh, I'm never gonna like experience this, and then you end up like meeting people that like, you're like, I listened to you when I was like 11, 12 years old, and like now I'm talking to you and you're just a normal dude, and you're also only like 10 years older than me, which
Yeah.
blows my mind a lot of the times. Like I went on a tour with our good friends Bewitcher from Portland,
Yeah,
Oregon.
yeah, I love Bewitcher, man. They're
So
fucking
Bewitcher
great.
was the first band that Nite toured with. We were main support for them on our first time playing the Hell's Heroes Festival in Houston,
Okay,
Texas.
yeah.
They took us out. We did a tour with them, became very fast friends, and then they got a tour offer back in 2023 to go out and be main support for the Cavalera tour,
Mm,
the Beneath the Remains Arise tour. Their drummer Eris was unavailable at the time, and so they tapped me to fill in on drums. So I got to
mm.
do a month-long tour with Bewitcher, sitting in as the fill-in drummer for Cavalera. But I got to like meet and hang out with Max and Igor every day. That like,
Yeah.
again, I had Sepultura on cassette tape, and they're like, oh, this is band from Brazil. Like they're just, I'm never gonna see these people in my life even. And then I'm like on tour with them, and not only are they just like very approachable, normal dudes, the most genuinely friendly, stoked, inspired, like fully engaged musicians. And to be like,
Yeah.
in your mid 50s and still be in love with heavy metal, like Max is like a fucking like teenage kid. Like he's so
Yeah.
excited about heavy metal still. Like when you talk about Venom, like the way his eyes light up, and you're just like, dude, this is and to me, like that's aspirational. I want to be that person. Like as silly as that might seem to the rest of the world, like if you can be, keep advancing in age and keep being inspired by something like music and art, you're doing it right, man. That guy's got it figured out.
100% across, and that's across like any industry or anything like that. Just being passionate and hungry to learn and stuff like that.
Totally.
I've never had the fortune to interview Max yet, but I know several friends have. But he also does like any interview that he's asked for, and I've listened to so many of those and seen firsthand what you're
He's
describing. Well, not firsthand, it's secondhand, I guess, but what you're describing of just like, yes, let's talk about metal, and let's whether it's his band or not. And most of the time, it's not his band. He wants to talk about other shit.
yes. Yeah, because he
So
genuinely loves it. He's genuinely excited about it. I mean, talk about the one of the best ambassadors for heavy metal today, still touring. Like they're out on tour right fucking now. Like
Yeah.
that dude works really hard. And it's all, all credit to Max and Igor, but like as we know, it's, always the woman behind the man. His wife Gloria
Yeah.
is responsible for all the stuff they're doing. She books everything. She does everything. She's the best manager
Hell
ever.
yeah.
Great lady. Awesome. Love Gloria.
Shout out to Gloria. Shout out to the women behind the men. We wouldn't work without them. I know my life would be in fucking ruins. I don't know about yours,
I
Patrick.
barely work as it is, so yeah.
There you go. All right, so before we get into the pick real quick, so you moved to San Francisco in 2003, and then so just real quick, I guess, how did you start playing with Nite, and kind of how has that grown your musical journey now as you're, releasing this third album and have like created or been part of this creation of this band over the past few years?
Yeah. So Nite originated with our lead vocalist, guitarist, Van Labrakis. He's originally from Athens, Greece, where he grew up. He was coming from LA via Berlin, Germany. Truly an international Renaissance man.
Yes, he is.
And while he was in LA, he was working on demos for what would eventually become Nite, but just kind of couldn't get a lineup together. Like when I say demos, it's like I was like, this is a record. Like these songs are done.
Yeah.
Programmed drums meticulously, amazing bass lines, fully like recorded and mixed. But he will disagree with this till the end of time. But like it sounded like a record. I was like, these demos sound better than most finished albums that you hear today.
Yeah.
But he really wanted it to be a live project. He really wanted it to be a band. He's like, I don't want to be a one-man band. I don't want this to be a bedroom project. And so we started to actually like, put the songs together, restructure a few things, rewrite a few parts. And all those original demos that he created became the first album, Darkness, Silence, Mirror, Flame. And so this was around late 2017 into early 2018 where we formed. Album came out in March of 2020, literally the week of everything shutting down. And it was
Happy 5-year anniversary to Darkness, Silence, Mirror, Flame.
We're trying to not be a pandemic band. So like, unfortunately though, like that first album came out literally the week of everything shutting down. Our second record, Voices of the Coronian Moon, was recorded completely in isolation because it was at the height of like the lockdown. And so like we all recorded our parts individually. And like I'm not an engineer. I'm a stupid drummer, man. Like I had a lot of we had a lot of very in-depth Zoom calls on how to operate Pro Tools. But it's been amazing to release the first two albums and have them, do as much as they've done during lockdown. So like I will say that with the release of this third album, I can feel a difference. Like they're from the very first video that we released, Crow Fear the Night, back in January, to like, the album coming out. It's felt like a completely different world. So fingers crossed we don't somehow incite another pandemic by releasing an album.
The bird flu is coming. The crows yet to fear the night, Patrick.
That we tried to not think about that too hard, but
no, but that's amazing. I know, as so many musicians I've talked to, because I started doing like my music journalism. Like I come from a news background and a journalism background, but I started doing like this type of shit around about that time as well. And it's been so interesting to, reconnect a lot of times or see some of the bands that, I was talking to right when shit happened, like we don't know what's going to go. And then, 5 years removed, talk about, they've released 2 or 3 albums since then or something like that. Or people who have still gotten their stuff together being like, wow, this feels like another debut, or it's like there's so like it actually feels like everything since you can tangibly see everything rather than just being in your little box staring at a screen and everything like that,
Well, and just, I mean, the huge thing we're not talking about is the fact that like we can tour again.
Yeah.
That is something that makes all the difference. And we snuck in as many tours as we possibly could, between lockdowns and as soon as everything opened back up. And we've done as much as we possibly can prior to the release of this third record. And with this now, we're really hoping to like get as much touring as possible as we can to support it. So that's
Cool. So get out there, people who like Nite and want to support live music. I'm sure that we'll talk about the new record and Nite and stuff like that a little bit more.
Totally.
But now let's get into the details and everything. Let's get into the nitty gritty while we're here. So I'm rubbing my hands. We're here to listen to Jon Oliva's Pain, the record Maniacal Renderings, which if nobody knows who the fuck that is, you might know a little band called Savatage. And, you know, most metalheads I think will probably know in the Hall of the Mountain King, regardless of whether you've listened to any other Savatage before. But
True.
yeah, this is a fun kind of out there pick. I would have never been able to guess this album in a million years. So Patrick, you've got this like Joker grin on your face right now. Why do you love this record, and why did you want to bring it on Spinning the Wax today?
I could have gone a lot of different directions with this. So within Nite, Savatage has become a touch point for various references from like their Power of the Night album, which was like early Savatage, that has this sort of like what we've dubbed in Nite street metal sound.
Okay.
And that being when we hear some of those like verse riffs, and especially, you know, Criss Oliva's guitar playing, that's super percussive and gritty, and like the way that we've described it is you're walking through a sort of dark alley in the city at night. It's just rained and you're dragging a unreasonable amount of chains behind you, and those chains are creating sparks that lights up the darkened corner of the alley, and it reveals that there's actually a jaguar standing there watching you. And that is the sound of Criss Oliva's guitar playing, especially on the early Savatage. And again, like we're not sort of like emulating that style or approach as much as the personality of that. We're trying to capture that. What does that feel like? So we at Nite always refer to Savatage in many different ways, but especially for that reason. And for my pick, you know, everyone knows Hall of the Mountain King. It's a classic heavy metal record. And it's definitely where I started with Savatage. But you know, I think for me, my favorite Savatage album is Streets, which will tell you almost everything you need to know about me.
Yeah. A rock opera, Patrick.
I am very nerdy. I love the theater. I love a very sort of like over the top theatrical bombastic performance, because that is what heavy metal is.
Yeah.
And for me, like the reason why I go back to Savatage repeatedly, and you know, Jon Oliva's Pain and all of the projects that he's been involved in, not so much TSO, but we'll get to that. The like theatricality of it, the like over the top, like larger than life, like superhuman, these experiences that, you know, theater gets sort of like derided a lot for like how just cheesy and silly it is, because it's an exaggeration of human emotion. But like I would say that if you can sort of accept that premise of like, yeah, this is silly. This is not how we actually talk. Like nobody's walking around like singing to each other, but like it's capturing some very sort of like deep, you know, human experience and human emotion that it's hard to tap into otherwise. And so the parallels for me between like theater and heavy metal are vast, and like that's where this one album like this, you know, Jon Oliva's Pain, Maniacal Renderings, also Savatage, Streets, those tap into that perfectly. And like I said, I was going to pick something like Streets or even Gutter Ballet, which is another favorite Savatage record of mine. But I wanted to go one level deeper because I think there's a lot for an album like this to offer, but we'll go into this too. It has a lot working against it as well.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
And I don't know if you want to get into the stuff about his brother right now or a little bit later. I'm sure we can probably get into that a little bit. But going to your point about like the theatricality with heavy metal, right? I mean, I told you earlier that you know, Iron Maiden was one of my gateway bands, right? Favorite band of all time. Like if you don't have theater kids, you don't have Iron Maiden, right? And like there's levels of cheese, and I talk about this all the time on like my streams or any of the other like recordings that I do and stuff like that. And I love Patrick, a good amount of cheese with my
Yeah.
metal, right? I think it's like at the end of the day, you're right. Heavy metal is supposed to be fun, right? And I feel like if you take it too seriously, there is in danger of even becoming like even cheesier or like able to be more made fun of, I think, than if you're in Rhapsody of Fire or something like that. And I've had many conversations and heard many conversations about the fact that it's like, well, if you look at, black metal and power metal, the theatrics and the nerdiness and the geekiness of all of those things are not all too different from each other. It's just that most of the time the power metal bands know that they're in on it, and the black metal bands don't want to be on it because they're too cult and too serious for it. Not all of them, though. And I don't mean to generalize black metal fans, but I
Yeah.
think that the theatricality and the cheesiness of heavy metal is always going to be there. You don't have to be Manowar, but you want to have a little bit of fun at your own expense.
If you don't accept just the premise that you're either enjoying and or living the experience of watching grown adult humans run around on stage in tights and chains and leather and animal pelts if you're Manowar, which by the way, I'm a huge Manowar fan, and
Oh
I
yeah,
I say this all with love
a
and
hundred
utmost
percent.
respect because Manowar is one of the best bands of all time. But like you have to sort of buy into this idea that like this is fucking ridiculous. And like that's why it's fun. Like if you can't sort of like you get on board with that, and even the most cult black metal, whatever, like warriors out there in the forest, like at a certain point, like you're gonna reach the realization that you're like, wow, this is silly, but it's fun.
Hmm.
Like if black metal, like if it could not take itself so seriously, to your point, like it would realize how fun and exhilarating and freeing and like just liberating it is to be like, I'm gonna be a wild animal in the forest, carrying my like, torch and painting my face and running around in the snow. Like that's awesome. Like
Yeah.
you're reverting back to some primal feral childhood state, and like that's great. But like acknowledge how silly it is. Like this is all silly. And that is why we do it. Like that it's not just escapism. It actually like enriches our lives to be able to
Mhm.
be free and open enough to be able to like experience things that normal life doesn't allow us to experience. So for me, like the more extreme and the more, like celebratory of like how insane it is that we get to do this, the better. Like that's why we're here. That's why we're doing this.
Well, thank you for coming to Spinning the Wax, everybody. I think we could wrap it up there. No, I'm joking. No, I love that, and I agree wholeheartedly. So for people who have never listened to
Oof.
this band before or this project, what do you think that they should expect going into this record? What I guess what do you want to
Okay.
prime them for? I suppose.
Okay. So in 100% fairness to Jon and his project, listen to Savatage first.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't come into this record cold, because you may enjoy it. It may totally speak to you, but
Hmm.
let's be honest here. Jon Oliva's Pain does not exist without Savatage. Jon Oliva's Pain to me is like it is a Savatage through the mirror in another dimension. Like
Hmm.
so much of what he's written with this band is referential and directly talking, and it's almost like he's having a conversation with Savatage. I mean, we'll get into it, but like
Interesting. Yeah.
the first song on this record is basically him covering his own song, like All the Man King. Like it literally is. It's like he wrote an alternate version. Like, okay, I want to write the remix of All the Man King, and again, like you need to accept that premise that this is Jon Oliva like exploring who he is as a musician and looking at all sides and all facets of this in a way that's not restrained by monetary concerns or like, like and I can get into all this because I have a lot to say, but like
Yeah, please.
this is post Trans-Siberian Orchestra, right?
Hmm.
They've already met Paul O'Neill, which I can get into that as well, how that changes his whole life. They've met Paul O'Neill. He's had Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Savatage is on hiatus. He doesn't really know what, he's doing, but he knows he needs to make music. And so Jon Oliva's Pain for him was, a way to sort of process his brother's death,
Mm.
which he was still dealing with, even though it was over 10 years after Criss had passed away, and really like express himself in the way that he wanted to without all of the sort of encumbrances of Savatage and what Trans-Siberian Orchestra had become and how they sort of had become enmeshed in a lot of people's minds,
Mm.
even though they're totally different bands and whatever. But like, um, Jon forms this band and he wants to call it Taj Mahal.
Hmm.
So the first album is called Taj Mahal because it refers to Savatage as the Taj or whatever. Obviously, there's a American blues musician that would have had an issue with them calling it Taj Mahal or his estate or whatever. Which, by the way, if you don't know those Taj Mahal records,
Mm-mm, I don't. I like other
they're
than just like reading about them on Wikipedia and shit like that.
incredible,
Okay.
incredible stuff. The stuff, I'm a big fan of that early blues stuff. Which again, heavy metal doesn't exist without the blues. Like
100%.
that's a whole different sidetrack we don't need to go down. But he wants to call it Taj Mahal. So that right there tells you the level of um I don't know if it's lack of self-awareness or like just uh just not be concerned. He's either like so kind of like fuck it, fuck the world. I'm Jon Oliva. What are you gonna do? Like I've heard it all. And I've watched way too many interviews with him. I've listened to, so much kind of oral history on the band and Jon is he's a like most musicians, he's a problematic conflicted sort of, character. He's not the most reliable narrator. His
Mm.
stories change a lot. And you kind of have to sort of take everything he says with a grain of salt and be like, it's Jon. Um, but this band was like, I think just a really important sort of personal milestone for him to come out and prove that he still had the chops. He could still write. He had not sort of been completely swallowed into this Trans-Siberian Orchestra background figure that he sort of became because he doesn't perform with TSO. He's just, one of the producers,
Mm.
writers, whatever, director people. So I think for him, this was just a really important, like, personal milestone for him to, you know, keep staking his claim as an important heavy metal musician in the mid 2000s.
I think that there is something to be said about, even artists of his caliber needing to just like, walk the world for a little bit, so to speak, and
Totally.
find out what is at that point in time, what is making them tick or get away to refresh themselves.
And just he needed he needed a new band. He needed to get back out on the road. You watch interviews with him and the band from this era, and like you can just tell he's like back to like, he's having fun again.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, sure, he fucking drinks too much and like he's got a drug problem. He obviously has a weight problem. Like he's very aware of all this shit. Like,
Hmm.
anybody in that position. But like it felt like when you watch him talk about this band and being on the road, it feels like this like weight was lifted. Like it's almost like he could kind of like transcend some of again, like getting over his brother's death and like trying to sort of, write through that. And specifically this album, which again, these are all stories from Jon, so who knows how much of this is true.
Hmm.
Uh, this album came from um, Criss's wife, who was, so Criss Oliva, for those that don't know, uh, unfortunately passed away in a car accident. He was with his wife. I believe she was driving. I could be wrong on that. She survived the wreck. He unfortunately did not. Um, so she was actually moving uh, and found a cassette tape with Chris's handwriting on it that said, Savatage riffs or whatever. And that's how, him and his brother Jon would write together. They'd write riffs, piano takes, vocal takes, and like send cassette tapes back and forth. So Jon gets this tape and it's got a bunch of Chris's riffs on it. Criss has been dead, now at this point, probably 7, 8 years. And he's like, there's some amazing stuff on this. I think there's a record in here. And so he takes these riffs as sort of the basis and writes, this second Jon Oliva's Pain album from that, which
Yeah.
is again like it's a beautiful story. It creates this whole sort of like wonderful narrative about like Jon processing the pain and writing with his brother, even though his brother's gone. Again, I don't know how much of it's true, but it's
Mm.
like, it's a great story, you know?
Yeah, and it feeds into I think the name now after not being named Taj Mahal is like fuck it. And this is my pain. Instead of just being like we're pain, it's like Jon Oliva's pain. All right, like no.
Totally. For the uninitiated, if you're not a Savatage fan, it's really hard. And even for most Savatage fans, it's hard to get past the name.
Mm.
Like, and again, that to me is that element of Jon's personality, just being like, fuck it, I don't care. Like, I can do whatever I want. People can like it or not. And it's almost like it speaks to the thing you and I were just discussing, where like there has to be this acceptance of kind of a level of cheesiness or absurdity or extremity. And I mean, this is extreme in the kind of like the cheese department or the cringe department, but like if you can get past the name, if you can accept that, like, yeah, this is just who this dude is. He doesn't give a fuck. You have to kind of meet him where he is, and it's
Yeah.
it's hard for most people. It was hard for me too. I was like, I put off listening to these records for years because I was like, ooh, Jon Oliva's pain. Like, you just like, what am I signing up for just by
Yeah.
listening? Like, and again, like he wanted to call it Taj Mahal. There was probably a whole back and forth with like, the record label and stuff too, and his management. But like, I now fully embrace and love that it's called Jon Oliva's Pain, and specifically this album that came out in 2006 has very unfortunate artwork as
Yeah.
well.
Very 2006 artwork. I'll have
It's
this
just
up on the stream.
it's got so many strikes against it with, like terrible Photoshop and awful typography. And there's this like baggage of like a lot of kind of like late 90s, early 2000s, almost like alt rock, like ghosts kind of haunting this record, which
Yeah.
I can get into also, like, because I love that shit as someone who was in high school in the mid 1990s. I love a lot of that what was called alt rock or grunge, which I can't say without throwing up in my mouth a little bit. But yeah, like that stuff it's there. It's there on this record. I'm probably not selling this album to anybody who hasn't listened to it yet, but you gotta just bear with me a little bit and just trust that there's some magic in this record. And I would love to highlight some of that if
Yeah, there
possible.
definitely is, and I took my notes on this and everything like that as well. Even through the bad songs or the songs that I'm like, what the fuck were they thinking at this point? But I think that is an amazing, preamble to this record, and now I'm even more excited to dig into it than I was before. So, Patrick, let's do this. I'm
Oh
gonna bring
shit.
this up. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Here we go.
This is Jon Oliva's Pain, 2006, recording Maniacal Renderings in 3, 2, 1, play.
The first thing that really speaks to me when I think about this record is the lineup.
Yeah. It's a lot of his, like a lot of Circle to Circle members and people that he had played before, right?
Yes. Obviously, once Jon realized he couldn't really sing anymore with Savatage, he said his voice was shot. He said he had health issues. He said there's a litany of excuses, and they change interview to interview, which
Mm.
depending on when you hear Jon talk about it.
Yeah.
But Savatage brings in Zach Stevens to basically take over lead vocal duties. He sticks with the band for almost a decade, I think. Zach, eventually exits Savatage, moves into a band called Circle to Circle. And keeping with the cheese theme, it's not the number two, it's not TO, it's a Roman numeral. But basically, this album is the entire lineup of Circle to Circle minus Zach Stevens backing up Jon Oliva. And when you get into sort of the Savatage, family of members, you realize that like everybody's played on everything.
Yeah.
And this I think is what sort of also helps, like with Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Once that becomes, something that Jon is behind, he's got this huge sort of like backlog of musicians that he can be like, oh, like I've played with all these guitarists, all these keyboard players, all these drummers, and they're all amazing musicians, great
Yeah.
players. So, it seems weird and incestuous that it would be the singer that took over for Savatage's band that Jon basically kind of stole for this, but
Yeah.
they all kind of work together, you know, like that's how it
One
works.
big happy family. And so this is interesting too, because I imagine that there's going to be a lot of heavy metal fans that are probably the same way, that know Savatage or have listened to them but maybe don't have the huge like knowledge or even know how many albums they have or anything like that, right?
Well, and they have such a interesting storied career too. But I think what you're talking about, as far as like if you're familiar with Savatage at all, you know Hall of the Mountain King, which means you pretty much know this first
This
song.
song, yeah, dude. It's when I was listening to this, I was like, I don't know if this is intentional. This is very much a Hall of the Mountain King vibe. And then I looked at it as like through the eyes of the king. It's got to be intentional.
Yeah, but again, like you know, Jon's one of those people. I think you either love him or hate him, and if you love him, like you're along for the ride with him. You're like, cool, Jon, I accept
Yeah.
that you have called the first song on your second basically solo album Through the Eyes of the King, and it feels suspiciously like your biggest hit from your old band. You know, like you could take a lot of different approaches to that and be like, okay, like you're just trying to feed off your previous success and what, like I don't think it's any of that.
Mm-mm.
I really do take Jon at face value here, in that he's sort of like working through, you know, personal things, professional things, compositional, you know, sort of like uh things he's been presented with, you know, some of his brother's riffs that were never finished. So it's like he gets to sort of like, I don't know, like, is this a therapy album? Like maybe like he's
Yeah.
kind of working through some shit, but like if this if this is him journaling or whatever, right? Like, and having a therapy record, all the better, because I feel like there's so much good stuff on this, and it's so fully realized that like it will always be, I think, relegated to a side project.
Hmm.
People will always, and that's fine. Like, it's what it is. But like I think that like so many side projects like kind of become throwaways or afterthoughts, or like, well, I had all this shit and I just needed to like kind of get it out. I think the thing that Jon excels at um is seeing something through as much as he can. And so
Mm.
like for this stuff, it could have, I think, kind of been half-assed and thrown together, but like these these sounds are fully realized. Like this is a great recording too.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you
It
think
sounds
about
great.
like the fidelity of something that came out in 2006. Great separation, killer drum sound. You know, he's always got layers of keyboards.
Yeah.
There's a lot of strings on this record. There's piano. So like by this time in his career, he obviously had enough time in the studio and worked with enough engineers to really know exactly what he wanted this record to sound like.
I was talking to someone recently who was like, has been in a band for a really long time and was basically like saying, in their opinion, that they don't think that you can be too referential or plagiarize your own self too much, especially if you're using it to kind of forward yourself or find something else in that, right? And like you can think about like the latest couple of Priest records, right, where there are plenty of bits in that where like, wow, that sounds like something that could have been off of Turbo or Screaming for Vengeance or whatever, but yet it's like, but also I've never heard this Priest song before. And that's just I feel like when a band, and like we can talk about this with Nite too, has their DNA or whatever they're gonna do is just gonna sound like that no matter what. And sometimes it's a cheeky thing to be like, hey, I snuck this riff from 20 years ago in there, huh? Did you notice it?
Well, that's a great I think segue into a lot of things I want to talk about,
Oh,
which
great, yes.
is like I don't see it as self-plagiarism. Like I see it more as like it's world building, right? So like when
Mm,
you're creating a band, you're creating a sort of, you're creating a narrative, you're creating a mythology, you're creating this like, you know, mystique behind this like this character that you're making, right? Like you're writing your own story. So
yeah.
like in a way, I feel like if you
Yeah,
beautiful,
there's like
beautiful piano,
raindrop keys that happen right there. Oh my God.
gorgeous. But
Yeah.
like I think you need to develop that character and give it layers,
Yeah.
right? So like if your character kind of appears once in a song or an album or whatever and then goes away, it's like it's hard, I think, for your audience to kind of like be invested or stick with that. If you start creating a character that has like a storyline that extends across multiple albums, across like decades even, like then it becomes like all the more interesting. And like I, I don't see that as like you have to have a concept album or you have to
Sure.
have a gimmick.
Hmm.
I think it's deeper than that. And we talk about this in Nite all the
Mm.
time because we are very self-referential in that we are kind of exploring different themes throughout
Yeah.
the music. This guitar solo right here, by the way.
And it's double tracked in each of the right and the left channel, which is fucking incredible too.
That is when you know your way around the studio.
Yeah.
And you want to make something sound huge, but also melodic and harmonically gorgeous, beautiful. I mean, for Nite, we drop all kinds of references in our music to things we've done, and because we're not a concept band, but we have themes we're exploring. Like Nite for us is all about contrast.
Mm.
So, what does contrast look like musically? What does it sound like? What does the aesthetic of contrast look like? And for us, just the basis of the sound of the band. It's traditional heavy metal, like 70s, 80s, hard rocking heavy metal with black metal vocals. So like right there, we're setting up this idea of contrast. People aren't maybe necessarily used to hearing that. Not that we're the only ones that do that.
Of course.
We'd like to think we do it in a unique way, but like there's sort of tension in that contrast too. You can see clearer lines between things when there's a good amount of contrast, and we try to sort of approach that with everything from our artwork to our stage show. Every way the band's presented, we want to make sure we're keeping sort of a clear theme in that. And there's we drop little hints all the time to like past songs we've written, even other bands that we're in or other,
The Last Scorpion, man. Van told me about that one. Yeah. I was like, hell yeah. Just the Scorpions. Let's go. Fuck yeah.
I talk about the Scorpion, or I talk about Scorpions endlessly. So that was, I'm sure, my fault for talking his ear off about it. But like, and like even a band like Judas Priest, like we we are a band divided on Judas Priest.
Oh, really?
As you can see, I have the the Priest tattooed on me. Our bass player Avinash also has a Judas Priest tattoo. The other two band members in Nite are not as excited about Judas Priest as Avinash and I.
Interesting. Okay.
They appreciate Priest,
sure.
but they're not they're more in the Iron Maiden camp.
Gotcha.
Not that we don't appreciate Iron Maiden.
I like them both, man. Like Maiden's my favorite band of all time, but like sometimes it's just like maybe give Maiden like 99% and Priest 97% or so. You know what I mean? It's just like they're two huge bands for me. I'll take them both.
But your Priest comparison is actually really apt for this because you think about Judas Priest today still writing incredible albums, with a completely different lineup, right? But they have this whole backstory and back catalog and like all these riffs and all these things that they've helped to sort of like define the genre of heavy metal. Like, why would you not use that as source material? You know what I mean? Like Richie's gonna write a Judas Priest riff that sounds like Judas Priest, even though he's the new guitarist.
Yeah. What I thought was interesting about this too is I had the great fortune to interview Richie for Knotfest when that album came out, and what he was saying is like, I was gushing about the album because I mean, again, I really love Firepower, and was like, wow, this might be the best album that they've done in like
amazing,
maybe since Painkiller, but also maybe since Angel of Retribution, because that was a formative album for me too. But then fucking Invincible Shield comes out, and I'm like, after the first couple listens, I'm like, wait a second, is this better than Firepower? How the fuck did they do this? And there were so many like surprises and turns of song, like things that you wouldn't expect Judas Priest to go. And Richie was like, that was Glenn Tipton. Like, he has the knowledge and the thing. I would show him a riff, and then he'd be like, I had, even though he can't really like play as well as he used to, he's still very involved with the songwriting process, right?
Sure.
It was like, it would be great if we like took this here and did this, and then maybe we could do like a harmony with that as well. And like, that's what you're talking about, right? Where like Richie Faulkner is so influenced by Judas Priest that he can't help but make a Judas Priest riff. And then he's got the two dudes who have written more best heavy metal songs than perhaps like anybody else in the fucking genre, be like, yeah, here, we'll take that riff and like do this with it. And it's fucking incredible.
But I think there's a larger sort of story in that, which again refers directly back to this Jon Oliva record, in that you don't ever start from zero. So if you're even a new artist, there is no way you've not been influenced by or studied something about the thing that you're attempting to do, whether it's heavy metal or not. Let's talk about heavy metal though, because that's why we're here.
Yeah.
So like nobody's writing a heavy metal record in 2025 in isolation, that they're going to create some new work of art that's never been heard before. All art is a reaction of what happened directly before it. If you're lucky enough to be a Judas Priest or an Iron Maiden, or I would even argue Jon Oliva, you are part of heavy metal history. Why would you not use your own, like, not only your own knowledge, your own experience, but like you're again like building on this story that you've started and you've created. Like create more. Like there's no reason to try to like reinvent the wheel, you know. And I think again there's like this is a theme in our talk. You're always sort of having to like accept the premise that like there's kind of a format, right? There's a format for heavy metal. We've all agreed that it's like heavy loud guitars, probably whether they're singing clean or guttural, some aggressive singing, and an attitude, you know. And once you kind of like sign up to be like, yeah, I'm on board for all that shit, then like you're going to be referring back to a lot of stuff that came before you, because there's a huge history of heavy metal. And so like for me, what this record does is so perfectly captures the sound and spirit of Savatage, and that lineage. Like Jon's bringing all that history of Savatage in with him, literally bringing in some of his brother's riffs, and then also creating a record that is a reaction to what happened just before, which is like late 90s, early 2000s. I will just say this in retrospect now, because I'm older and I lived through it. A lot of that stuff is trash. Like that music,
of course.
that was not to me a high point in heavy music. And I don't think I would have too many detractors there. You never know. But like I love that Jon is able to sort of distill all this stuff down into like something that still comes across as a coherent record. You know, as we mentioned, there's like these moments in this album that they're almost like alt rock. I don't know. They're almost like Alice in Chainsy, or like, you know,
I did write that down in some of my notes, where I did feel like, oh, there's some like, you know, Jerry Cantrell late Staley harmonies or something like that, you know, like, and that's in retrospect or whatever, but also like just with the time period and, you know, as an artist going through that, I think that you can't help but be you know, influenced by that type of stuff. I mean, even listening to like Bruce Dickinson records in like the early 2000s or something like that, there was definitely some of that. I mean, fucking, I can't remember what the album he did that he wanted to do like an alt rock project, but the record label was like, no, you have to put it under your name or whatever. Same type of deal. And honestly, that record kind of fucking rules if you put yourself in like, this isn't Bruce trying to be a singer of a heavy metal band, but then just trying to be a singer of a contemporary rock band, but not even like, you know, trying to, you know, ride the waves of that sound. He's doing his music the way that he wants to do it, through the contemporary lens or something like that. But I don't know. It is really interesting.
Well, and I think in a way that's sort of what we're talking about is like, you sort of, I mean, you don't have to, but if you want to sort of appreciate these types of records, you kind of have to meet the artist where they were at the time. You know, like every album is sort of this like time capsule of like, this is where my life was at this time. And you kind of have to, in a way, be able to put yourself in that position of like, where was Jon Oliva, you know, in 2005 when he was recording this album? And I've wholeheartedly embraced that sort of journey of meeting him there and being there with him. And like, I honestly feel like I appreciate and enjoy Savatage's catalog more, having really kind of deeply dove into the Jon Oliva catalog. And because again, I think it just forms a more kind of like well-rounded picture of who this guy was and sort of what he was doing. And I really, and you know, this might be going out on a limb and I might be attracting some hate mail for this, but like,
oh please, we love hot takes over on the show.
This is a Savatage record. This is like, if it's true that these are Criss Oliva's riffs, and Jon wrote around these riffs, which that's how they wrote Savatage. To me, the classic Savatage was Jon and Criss. They were always, you know, obviously the core of the band. If Jon's writing a record on Criss's riffs, he's writing the lyrics, he's writing probably most of the keyboard, the piano parts, and he brings in these musicians that he's worked with in the past and that he knew, from the Zach Stevens connection. Like, I feel like this is a Savatage record. Like when I
Interesting.
listen to it,
Yeah.
and I kind of like, put all the other stuff out of my mind and just enjoy it as it is like if I just accept that it's a Savatage record, that's where I say, like, if you can get past the fucking name, if you can get past the shitty artwork, if
Yeah.
you can get past kind of the time period that it was made and all the other trash that was being produced in 2005, like, and just enjoy it as a Savatage album. And this is the benefit, I think, of history, of us listening to this album 20 years on.
Sure.
We can kind of like be like, yeah, maybe this was just a lost Savatage record. And I think that's my approach to this and my premise for how I kind of think about
If
it.
we were on Shark Tank, I would buy. Like, I buy that theory. I'm down with it. I mean, so for those that don't know, Poets and Madmen was the last Savatage album, came out in 2001, and they've been working on a record called Curtain Call for a while that should be out this year. We'll see. I know there's health problems and recording problems and all this other stuff. I've seen it still like 2003 or 2023, 2024, 2025. We'll see. We'll see what we get first, a new Savatage album or a new King Diamond album. I don't know. Probably the King Diamond
Oh,
album.
my money's on King Diamond for
Yeah.
sure. But I, John says the album is done. They
Mm-hmm.
says they're still working on the recording. Um, he fucking slipped and like broke some like, bone in his like vertebrae, or like, I mean, something that sounds honestly like painful and
Yeah.
awful. And like, I don't think it's like an excuse by any means, but like, there's always going to be a reason to delay this record. I mean, the thing that, you get nervous about is like, dude's 65 and not healthy. And you're like,
Yeah.
can we finish,
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
finish the album? And they've announced some festival dates and stuff. And like, John was originally supposed to join them on stage.
Mm-hmm.
It may be a Tipton. They even referred to this in interviews. They're going to maybe do like a Glenn Tipton type situation where he'll be there and he may join them for a couple songs or
Sure.
whatever, sing backups or take a lead vocal somewhere. But we got to talk about the song that's out right now.
Yeah, this is the one. I think this is my least favorite song on this whole record.
Okay. At the risk of sounding like an apologist, I am going to argue that Jon Oliva, I think personally, is one of the best heavy metal vocalists that is still working today.
Okay.
I believe that he actually writes some of the most beautiful ballads, and I think his piano playing and his understanding and appreciation again of theater and sort of like creating this drama and this like, I don't know, this depth that again, like I buy into it. Like I'm
Mhm.
already on board, so
Yeah.
like in a way it's easier for me. Even when he's like, singing a line like Jesus show me the answer, as an avowed anarcho-satanist, like that stuff is usually very stomach turning to me. But
Sure.
I think that his approach just as a musician to creating his own world and his own universe that really draws you in, and like there's so much beauty and grace and just like amazingly like, impactful moments to me, like emotionally on this record.
Mm.
This might not be my favorite song on the album, but I appreciate it for what it is, and I love his ballads. Like all of the ballads he wrote for Streets, the Savatage album, which is a rock opera. So again, you kind of got to be on board for the cheesiness that is contained therein. It's something about, I don't know, his ability to sing a beautiful ballad softly and gently, and like also just be this like big fucking offensive fat dude from the Bronx that like,
Yeah.
he's, he grew up in Florida, he lived in California also, but like he was born in the Bronx, and to me like he has this New York just kind of crudeness to him. And to me this is where I get kind of, very enamored with the Jon Oliva universe of trying to understand him, like trying to be like, who is this dude? And like, how is he making this amazing, gorgeous music? And allowing me to appreciate a record which he refers to like God and Jesus and all this stuff, which
Yeah.
again, normally is a huge turnoff for me.
Sure.
I accept it because you look at the lyrics on this record and it could have been really dated.
Hmm.
This was 2005, and he's writing some things that like, he alludes to some sort of like political situations. He alludes to some, sort of like problems in society. But I think what's kind of genius about his lyric writing in this is that they're generalized enough that they actually don't age.
Yeah, I thought that too
Like,
when I was going through it.
which is kind of fucking amazing. Like, think about how many records you could go back and listen to that were made in 2005 that make some allusion to what's happening in the world, and it immediately dates it, and you're sort of like, it becomes kind of
I think about
relevant.
that a lot with like contemporary bands nowadays, where like talking about like social media and like all of that stuff. Where it's like, okay, great, but we see how fast everything is going. Is a song telling the people who are screaming at you in the Instagram comments to fuck off? Will that sound? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I don't know. Like think of but like also at the same time, this has been happening for a little bit because Fear Factory has a song on Archetype called Cyber Waste, and I think that song is still pretty fucking good. Nothing you say matters to us. But like,
That's where you ride that line between like creating commentary kind of on contemporary society and situations that we're all dealing with sort of socially, but not being so specific that you're naming a certain politician or
yeah,
naming a certain technology. Like, you want to make these sort of like universal grand statements that age well. And I really do truly believe that like the lyrics on this have aged really well. And I think even his like religious references here, and I will say that I think they're
is he a
vague
religious dude? I don't know this. It's like he's super devout or
in the
something.
like, he's the religious dude that like I like grew up with in Ohio, where like
Okay,
you're born
yeah,
into it. Like his parents are probably Christian or whatever, and
sure.
he alludes to God and like heaven and stuff. But this dude doesn't go to church.
Yeah,
Like, this guy doesn't
that's,
fucking read the
that's,
Bible. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's why I was like, that's where it seemed like there was a little bit of a disconnect because there's a few times like we just heard it now, but there's going to be a couple of songs in
yeah,
a little bit where he references that. So I was like, man, what? Like, yeah, I don't know.
I think that he, like he likes to, I think, present and think of himself as this like religious person, but in the sense that like I think he genuinely wants to be a good person.
Sure.
And I think to him, like he has that association of sort of like, yeah, God and Jesus, and like it's the right thing and it's a good thing. But
Yeah.
like he's not, I'm sorry, but like, dude, you're not fucking Christian.
Well,
Like,
and
you've
in the
been,
same way that like metalheads can sing about, Satan and shit like that without being Satanist, right? Like you could sing about Jesus or God or whatever and not be a Christian band. But,
yeah. I mean,
I did get the ick a little bit when reading some of those lyrics in this one.
but like
But
also like,
yeah,
yeah, but you think about somebody like, like Ronnie James Dio,
yeah,
to me is like the epitome of that, where like he might, be singing about good and evil or God and the devil or whatever, but like it's all about, again, that thing I was referring back to with Nite is about contrast,
yeah,
light and shade. There is no light in the world without darkness. So like you need to explore the darkness in order to be able to see those really bright spots. And like I think that's what Dio was a master at. He understood that. So
mm,
like Dio could talk about God or whatever, and it's somehow okay. You know what I'm
hmm,
saying? Like
yeah.
the
No, I know
metalheads sort
exactly
of
what you're saying.
accept it.
Yeah,
And I'm sort of in the same boat with John, like we're like, if it was somebody else, somehow I would be more offended by it. But like
sure.
his mentions of God and Jesus, I feel like it just kind of like, yeah,
Yeah,
I see it
exactly.
as like it's a metaphor for like a larger, good and evil narrative. It's not about, I don't think the dude's going to church
No,
and
I
fucking,
yeah, it was just one of those things where from everything else it just kind of felt a little incongruent, I guess. But hey, it's his thing. He can do whatever the fuck he wants. This song, Push It to the Limit, which is just like the most 80s sounding fucking name ever, right? Just push it to the limit.
dude. Yeah, and these riffs, like to me, like this is where I hear the Criss Oliva, like
Yeah,
influence, and like it sounds like this could have been something that was on Power of the Night. Like
a hundred
this could have
percent.
been on a Savatage record
And
easily.
I think that we're talking about like sequencing and stuff like that. After the song that we just heard, to have just this like 3 minute banger come in and do that, you're just like, all right, you're washed away, great. So like, there is thought everywhere in this record.
Which is, we talk about it Night all the time. Like
Mm,
we argued endlessly over the sequencing of our new album called of the Serpent Sun,
mm,
because we want to create an experience. We want to create something that feels like a journey. Like you feel like, yeah, you want to have singles and you want to have a memorable song, you want to have a great guitar riff, you want to have a chorus that you can kind of shout along with. But like at the end of the day, we want to create sort of like a holistic work of art.
yeah.
So for us, we talked about sequencing uh and argued about it for months. We all made our own individual playlists of the album. We all had our, I had my list of reasons of why no, it has to be in this order because of this. And like I lost for the most part. But the drummer always loses. But like I just uh I want people to experience the record, and you don't have to sit down and listen to the whole thing. You can listen to bits and pieces of it. But
Mhm.
if you do sit down and listen to it, I want you to come away with feeling like you experienced a whole work of art. And I feel like
Very much
for
so.
us, at least at the point in our career with our third album, I feel like we've done the best possible version of that we can.
I agree with that. And before getting into talking about the band real quick, to kind of bring it back to one of the first interviews I did on the show, we are talking about, just talking about like why albums and like they're not a thing that people really think about anymore. It's playlists or singles or this or that. But
Yeah,
like, like an album is something that is going to stamp hopefully a longevity and a legacy, right? Because you can throw singles out and then maybe you can compile them later and whatever, and people may forget, may not. But like, an album is a thing, like you said, a stamp in time of a certain, moment for the people that made it. And, maybe it falls into the river of time, but maybe it doesn't. Like, who the fuck
yeah.
knew when the Jon Oliva's Pain that we were going to be talking about it fucking 20 years after the fact or anything like that, right? But yet,
Nobody thought that.
nobody, not even he did. But like, here we are and doing that, and I'm like, I think that that's great. And yeah, I guess to get to your point, I listened to Nite's debut earlier this morning while I was like getting ready for everything, and then I was like, you know what? I've listened to Cronian Moon so much, I'm gonna skip and go right to the new record and listen that through. And it was amazing to me to hear how like the bedrock of the sound has been there since like the very beginning, and even to a point hasn't exactly changed all that much, right? Because to your
Mhm.
point, it's heavy metal with black metal vocals on it, right? That hasn't changed, but yet,
It's the same formula.
yeah, but yet it sounds tighter, and like, like the band knows exactly what it is, and like the songs have like, like the album actually took me a couple of listens because I was like, oh yeah, it's pretty good. Did I like it as much as the other one? I don't know, but I like, as I got to set through and sat with it, all that sequencing that you were talking about, I found the shades and the contrast and all of the different things, or it's like the
Awesome.
mystic, that like mid-tempo type of deal, right? I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know, it kind of slows down the album the first time, second time, third time, fourth time. I was like, I really invested in this from like here on out to go through. Like, it reminds me of something on that could have been on like Seventh Son of the Seventh Son, that theatrical, big, long, we're moving you from one point to another.
Totally.
And yeah, it's just like, I, to your point about finding the DNA and creating a story and telling, right? I mean, I think of Nite almost as kind of like a visual comic book that has to deal with a lot with the art and the
For sure.
videos of the previous one, but there are characters in the stories, right? And they're
Totally.
like, there's a I don't know if you would consider the new album a concept album or not, but it definitely feels like there is a story that kind of weaves its way through there, intentionally or not. And I don't know, I just think that all of the points that you were saying, kind of like, I can see as a outside observer from your guys' band, which I think is really cool.
Awesome. I mean, I'm so glad that's coming through. And like, one of the sequencing things we talked about was always having the mystic be the midpoint of the record.
Yeah.
Like that was always as different as our approaches and our playlists were maybe individually, we always had that one in the center because it becomes this centerpiece of like allowing you to kind of like slow down and take a breath, but then also like you could kind of like transition to the next part and be ready for
Yes.
the back half of the record. And
Yeah,
it
because the
just
song grows so much that it doesn't start in the even though the tempo I think stays the same all the way through. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
yes, it
But
does.
like the layers and the stuff that gets added, it's just like a, crescendo almost to get through that. By the end of that thing, you're just like, fuck yeah, fist going, like, let's do it. When it's not really like a bombastic, hard charging song, but yet it
Not
has
at
that
all.
feel to get you in. I always say the 3/4 is the business. It's the time signature that means business. If you have a 3/4 song, it's like you're telling the person that you pay attention right now.
I don't got time for your fourth beat. I'm ready. I'm getting right back to the one. I don't have time to get another like extra rhythmic notation in there. No, I really do like I it's funny sitting in listening to this album while talking about Nite, I don't know if it's just me, but I feel a lot of parallels between it. Like, just even this is one of my favorite songs on the record, by the way.
Yeah.
And you hear this song start with just him and a piano, and his voice, Jon's voice is almost cracking at the beginning of this. And I think his voice was definitely not in top shape when he recorded this. He strays a little bit on some of the notes, and I love that. Like that humanness to me is endearing.
Oh yeah.
But like this right here, like
this is like Queen
sounds
meets David
vulnerable.
Bowie right here.
Yeah, he sounds ethereal and vulnerable, but then this big like piano like major chord thing comes in and you're just like it resolves in that right there. He was off key, but like it's great.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't mind.
It's interesting too, as we were talking about, because this song also evolves. You were talking about this, like around the 5 minute mark, it explodes into this song that is not even the same one that it was before. When you're thinking like, oh, this is kind of like you could see the stage curtains parting on this one, and someone in like a leotard kind of jumping around or whatever. But then by the 5 minute mark, it's just like now we're going like full wankery and like we're dialing everything up to 11.
Yes, and again, like I think in lesser hands it becomes a liability, but to someone I think as seasoned of a musician as Jon Oliva was at this point, like he handles this beautifully. This song, goes from like tender piano ballad at the opening, which to your point, at the end it's like this bombastic, like just like layered vocals and like huge guitars, like double bass drums. Like it becomes this massive, sort of heavy metal set piece that there's no way you would have thought it would have gone there at the beginning of the song. And like
seriously,
that's to me just like sheer, music. I don't want to say musical genius because I don't really believe in that, but I think it's just he had the experience and knowledge and just like confidence as a musician to like really produce something like this.
Yeah.
I know I alluded to it earlier, but like you really cannot understate the importance of Paul O'Neill in the Savatage journey. Do you know Paul O'Neill at all?
He's the Trans-Siberian Orchestra dude, right?
Right. So Paul O'Neill, rest in peace, came into the Savatage universe right after Fight for the Rock, which in the Savatage, history and lineage, that is a giant stinking fucking turd in their catalog. Jon refers to it as Fight for the Nightmare because it was a nightmare of an album. Jon has said this, so I'm just repeating what he says. I don't know if this is true. He was supposed to be working for the record label as a writer. They wanted to hire him to write songs for other people. Here comes the ending of the giant ending to the piano ballad. The tender piano ballad is now turned into this
like progressive metal like headbanging thing. Like, let's go.
So Jon is writing songs, he thinks, for other artists to get radio hits as album tracks, whatever. Label comes back and says, hey, guess what? That's going to be your next Savatage album. All these songs you've been writing and submitting to the label. And he's like, fuck no. That's not our record. Like, I was writing for other people. This is not me. This isn't my voice. Label's like, well, we're going to drop you if you don't make an album with these songs. So they make Fight for the Rock. This is a disaster of an album. Don't even listen to it.
I haven't listened to it and I won't.
Don't bother. But they're ready to break up. Like after this record comes out, it's a huge disaster. Nobody likes it. Critics panned it. Nobody buys it. It was supposed to be the album that launched them into superstardom because their career was like on this trajectory to kind of take off. And they had the talent. I mean, I am not like, I feel like I'm not being hyperbolic by saying I think Jon Oliva has one of the best voices in heavy metal, and I think Criss Oliva was one of the best guitarists that the 1980s had to offer. And there's other people that have said this same thing, people that saw him play, people that played with him, and people that were paying attention to, the Randy Rhoads of the world.
Yeah.
And even fucking Eddie Van Halen was like, yeah, Criss was like, he had it. He was going to be the guy. So Fight for the Rock comes out 1986 or so, 85, 86. Band's like, it's over. We're done. John was tapped to try out for Black Sabbath. He was going to go audition to be the next Black Sabbath singer,
Mm.
which talk about changing the course of history. That would have,
Right. Yeah.
I think he would have killed as Sabbath's frontman. I think he would have done an amazing job. Uh, Criss was hit up by Mustaine to be the next Megadeth guitarist. He was
Mm.
like, Mustaine was like, you're hired if you want the job, basically.
Sure.
So that's how good Criss was. When Dave Mustaine calls you and is like,
Without an
hey,
audition, just like you're in.
you're
Yeah.
you're in. You don't. I've seen you play. I don't need to hear anymore. And it was only because of Paul O'Neill coming into their orbit that the band stayed together and that they released Hall of the Mountain King.
Wow.
And those two things, that's why we're still talking about Jon Oliva today, was
Yeah.
because Paul O'Neill. The crazy thing about this whole story, and this is where okay, this is gonna get really deep and it's gonna get even more nerdy. Paul O'Neill had actually approached Fate's Warning prior to this. Do you know the band's Fate's
I know
Warning?
the band's Fate's Warning. Yes.
So I I worked on a book uh called Destination Onward,
Hell
uh,
yeah.
the story of Fate's Warning by my good friend Jeff Wagner. There's a story in this book where in 1986, Paul O'Neill actually has a series of meetings with Fate's Warning. Paul O'Neill pitches the Trans-Siberian Orchestra concept to Fate's Warning because he sees them as like these guys are a progressive metal band. I think they can handle this. They can do this. They laughed him out of the room. They were like, "You want to make a Christmas themed heavy metal band? You're fucking insane." And of course, we all know how that worked
We
out.
all know how that goes from there.
And so like that's like having that story on a book that I like worked on
Yeah.
with my friend and having it tie into the Savatage story, like I to me like that's where I like I'm not a journalist. I'm not a I mean I'm a musician and I'm a heavy metal fan, but
Hmm.
like those intersections and stories and seeing how small that world is, even at the sort of height of kind of like pre sort of like it's MTV's just happened and like heavy metal videos are becoming a thing and like the budgets are getting bigger. That world is still so small and so connected that it's like Fate's Warning could have been Trans-Siberian
Could you
Orchestra.
imagine? The
Like,
butterfly flaps its wings. So there is a universe out there, Patrick, where John is singing for Black Sabbath and
yeah,
Fate's Warning is doing Trans-Siberian
right?
Orchestra.
Like I love that. I love those details. But like it also allows like Paul O'Neill coming in and basically like taking this band that's failing and gonna retire to, Hall of the Mountain King. And then like Gutter Ballet, John talks about this all the time. They're in the studio recording and they're doing guitar leads and overdubs. And Paul's like, John, you're fucking stressing everybody out. Get the fuck out of here. Like go see a play or something. And he gives him tickets to Phantom of the Opera. And John goes and sees Phantom of the Opera in New York where they're recording,
Uh-huh.
comes back, and then just kind of like, and again, this is John telling the story, so I'm sure it's absolute bullshit, but it's a great story. Plays this little piano riff that becomes the song Gutter Ballet because he just had come from the theater. And again, so it's this story of the theater and like just a big, stage ready kind of entertainment value that whether or
Yeah.
not that was intentional by Paul O'Neill, to kind of like plant that seed because Trans-Siberian Orchestra hadn't happened yet, but
Hmm.
I think he was already working on Savatage and grooming. I know that's become
Yeah.
a,
Yeah.
a sketchy word I can't use, but like in a
Yeah.
way, he was sort of like he was like, "Are you guys ready to basically like create one of the like biggest sort of money making
The
schemes that
machine every
possibly be?"
Christmas selling out stadiums every year. And,
And
just the amount of guests and people that have been in the Trans-Siberian Orchestra or played with them or done. It's crazy. It's crazy.
so that world and John benefiting from that directly,
Hmm.
allows him to do an album like this.
Yeah.
He doesn't. Jon Oliva's Pain doesn't exist unless Paul O'Neill comes in, saves Savatage, creates Trans-Siberian Orchestra with them, and then you know John becomes a millionaire and can do like whatever he wants with his side
Exactly.
project. So
Yeah.
in a way, like you kind of you can't discount like this backstory and all the sort of details around it. Like it's not just like trivia or like like nerdery. Like it actually like all of it is important to like allowing this album to exist and like actually have like its place in history, which I think is, it still is an important one. At least that's what I'm arguing for.
No, I agree. And I think at the end of the day, I've said this before, but I think heavy metal musicians, listeners, fans, whatever, are storytellers at heart, right? And that's why we love these big stories of whether it's about Satan or whether it's about history or whether it's
The
just
Lord
about,
of the Rings.
yeah, or just some dude walking in a graveyard and like dancing with a ghost or something like that, right? But like that, but also because, we as heavy metal fans are, by definition insufferable and annoying and completionists and everything like that. We
Yep.
categorize and we find all these little things and we find, oh, well, this person played in this and that, and like all of the different little like webs that splinter out and spider out to connect every person, just like you were saying, like, you living in San Francisco being like 1 degree removed away from fucking like Robert Trujillo or something like that, right? I mean, all of these,
Totally.
finding all of these like producers that work with things or album arts or people that played on this one band who then went out to do this thing, it's crazy. And I mean, you're saying it's small. Heavy metal is kind of in a whole incestuous world in and of itself,
Totally. And I think that, that again, that's not like sure, there's some sort of, I guess, satisfaction as a fan of music, growing up and sort of getting to experience firsthand some of this stuff that you thought was unattainable.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a certain satisfaction in that, but like I think for me, the larger story and the larger sort of like impact that it has is that like all these artists and all these musicians, like they're just normal ass people.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're doing the same shit you and I are doing. Like,
Right.
like you're interviewing musicians and you're a journalist and you're writing about it. I'm a musician. I'm going out there. I'm trying to create music and art for people to hear. But like all those people did the same thing and they just happened to be at the right place at the right time or know the right
Exactly.
person or have the right connection. And I think that like, as frustrating and as annoying as it is to know that like because of many things outside of our control we will never be like like successful rich famous musicians
Mm-hmm.
just because that's not how I mean especially with streaming services and like I mean I'm listening to this album right now on Spotify
Yeah.
like I'm as much of part of the problem as anyone else
Exactly.
like
Jon Oliva's getting about what, maybe like 13 cents, if that, for both of us streaming this at the same time.
Drew, John, where's your Patreon? We need to be able to contribute to you for this. But like I think that there's for me the larger satisfaction is in knowing that like it's not about me being successful, right?
Mm.
Like I'm happy when my friends are successful. I'm happy when I just want to be a part of the larger network and story of heavy metal. If like even
Yeah.
if Nite is just a little blip on the radar. It's what you were saying before, about like an album sort of just that is the thing that we're leaving the world. We're
Yeah.
not going to be here forever.
Yeah.
If people remember that record and are talking about, Call to the Serpent Sun in 20 years in the same way that Jon Oliva probably didn't think we were going to talk about
Yeah.
maniacal renderings
Yeah.
in 2025, like that's it. Like that's enough. Like that's fine. I don't, we all knew we were not going to be rich from being musicians. I knew that pretty early on.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, why are you doing this? Well, it's important to me, but if it connects with anybody, if our like the fact that we have an audience to me still blows my mind. Like we did
Sure.
a Bandcamp listening party for the new album a couple weeks before it came out um in March and having people in Europe wake up at 4 in the morning because it's a live streaming event that just happens once so they
Mm-hmm.
can get to listen to our record that we made in San Francisco early. Like they just get a preview of the record. But there was people that were like, "Hey, I'm in Belgium. I woke up at 4 a.m." I'm like, dude,
Yeah,
that's
man.
insane. The fact
Yeah.
that even like we have fans in Europe still blows my mind, and that they're willing to like do something like get up on a Thursday or Friday like at 4 a.m. to listen to our
Yeah.
record is like I don't know, man. It's humbling and like we have nothing but like gratitude and appreciation for the fact that like we have fans that are as rabid about our music as we are about Judas
Yeah.
Priest or Iron
Very much
Maiden
so.
or Savatage. Like
And I think,
that's pretty cool.
maybe, consciously or not, I think tapping into the spirit and the essence of 80s heavy metal or whatever, right?
Yes.
Where the what really solidified its spirit or whatever, right? Because if like Black Sabbath were the originators, you had all the other new wave of British heavy metal bands, or the thrash metal bands of the 80s really inject the spirit of heavy metal that we know and love today. And I think by tapping into that without just being like, oh, we're fucking a Firehouse wannabe band or something like that, right? Just by tapping into that and doing your own thing with it, I feel like it kind of subconsciously gets that die-hard metal fan kid whatever invested in that. Granted, then the South Americans and the Europeans are just insane about their heavy metal to begin with anyway, right? But yeah, no, I think, and like it gets back into like kind of what you said, right? When I was growing up, I wanted to either be a musician, a writer, or a photographer, right?
Yeah.
Fucked all the way through. Those three things, like never gonna be making any fucking money doing any of those things professionally, no matter what. But I have found, especially over the last few years, and especially over the pandemic, and seeing your world kind of collapse in on itself and then grow older. As I'm not, I'm about to be on the later end of my mid 30s now, right? I'm not a young kid anymore. But like as and I'm sure that you experience this tenfold, right? In your 40s now, where you realize what is important to you and what you want to put effort towards, and block out the stuff that like doesn't serve you anymore and just doing what you want to do, right? And I'm sure that you still have your bad days and you worry about shit all the time, and fucking are in your head about like, oh, are we doing this right, or what wants to do whatever, but you're still doing it and you're seeing what the reaction is, and
I think the thing that you're sort of hinting at, which I love, is that the band I think connects with a lot of people that maybe come from that spirit of 80s heavy metal.
Sure.
And the sort of like,
yes,
let's be honest, like there's a lot of guitar wankery that's happening on our records, but it's tasteful.
Mm-hmm.
And there's beautiful leads, and they're well harmonized and they're well composed. All the solos are written out ahead of time. Like Van is very meticulous about his solos,
because you can hum along to his solos, right? Which is
that's all the solos that we love from our 80s guitar heroes.
Mm-hmm.
So we have that element, which I'm glad that is coming through in the language of the band. But I think having the blackened vocals and the sort of like the attitude of like a little bit more underground, or a little bit more kind of like like mysterious, or like it's not the right word, and I apologize, but edgy, not in a sketchy way anyway, but like just it draws in a different type of listener too, right?
Yes.
So that was the whole point, is like, how do we get younger kids that maybe grew up on like harsh vocals, guttural vocals, black metal vocals, they're still interested in something that's maybe a little bit more esoteric and a little bit more mysterious, but then have enough of the 80s heavy metal to have the old people my age and older to like really like connect with, and then also give both of those camps an appreciation for something they might not listen to otherwise.
Yes. And I literally was going to go to that point about the
awesome.
vocals and stuff like that after what you were saying. My elevator pitch for everyone, because I try and get whoever I can who is like, I know you like heavy metal, I know you like black metal, here's a band from San Francisco, you can go. But my elevator pitch for it, and I said at the beginning of the show as well, is just imagine if Immortal had covered or written Somewhere in Time. If that appeals to you, that you need to listen to this band right now, especially with Voices of the Cronian Mood. Like, yeah, dude, that is my elevator pitch, and I have gotten at least 5 people to listen to the band, because I can't promise they're still listening to the band, but they at least tried.
That's exactly what we want. And we talk about, I will not bore you with the hours of time we've spent listening to Immortal's vocal production on all their records, because we listen to that very, very closely. Like you listen to a band like Immortal, and I mean, especially some of those records, you're like, oh, that's throwaway recording or whatever. No, like they thought about that vocal production a lot. I know, I can't believe this, but I think we're already at the last song.
We are at the last song. It just flew. You're like, oh man, we did an hour-long album, and just like zoom. It's always what happens.
That's speaking to how much I can fucking talk about Savatage and Jon Oliva. But this song in particular, I'm sorry, if you're not moved by this song, and even if you don't know about, his brother Criss dying, like if you do, I think it makes it even more impactful. But it's like
Yes.
he's literally singing about how he goes and plays a show and he still imagines his brother's going to be there. He talks about this all the time in his interviews, where he's had a recurring dream that he's at a show, he finishes his set, he comes backstage, and in the green room, it's his brother Criss and Paul
Wow.
O'Neill are both
Huh.
sitting there on the couch, and they say, "Gotcha, Jon. We were just fucking with you. We're not dead." Like, and he's like, he talks about he has this recurring dream. He's had it like multiple times that he sees them, and
Wow.
he knows that they're there. And like this song, like, dude, the first time I heard this song, like, if you don't tear up listening to this, like,
Yeah.
if you really sit and listen to the lyrics, and it's the same experience I have with, with Savatage Streets. There's these ballads are just like there's so much emotion, and it, like, I really think it comes through, and it captures it. And again, if you're able to sort of get there and meet Jon where he is and accept, you know, all of the cheesiness, all of the cringiness, like, it's a very pure, like, very human, emotion. And that it's also this like big, fat, drunk, offensive dude from the Bronx who got arrested for fucking drunk driving and had coke on him, like, in the last couple years. Like,
Yeah.
that is just like, I love it. I love the contradictions of, like, he's so human.
Mm-hmm.
He's so flawed. Like he's so just like a bunch of people I know, and
Yeah.
that makes it even more amazing that he can create this beautiful art and this beautiful music. And that's, to me, like, where I keep coming back to this record, because it's the most human album I think he's ever made, and that's why I love it.
Wow. Yeah, and I did get like a little lump in the throat as you're telling the story about his dream and everything like that while you're doing that, because I mean, for people who aren't listening to the version where we've got the album synced up and everything like that, it says, "Still I pray for you now, every day I think of you, someday I'll meet you there, maybe you can show me through. Through the heavens we'll share, then I'll just say goodnight and leave you with this prayer." Like, yeah, just like, and
Dude,
anybody who's lost anybody, or even if it's just like a pet or something like that, right? Anybody who's felt that emotion, whether it's a brother who's died or a family member or a friend or whatever, can feel that, which is exactly what you're saying. Like, telepathy or a telepathy through the headphones and the speakers to make you feel what he's feeling, which at the end of the day I feel like is what art is really supposed to do.
for sure. And that's
Hmm.
again, like, where I was alluding to earlier with the lyrics. Like, they're so specific if you know his story,
Mm.
but they're so universal if you don't. Like you just said, everybody's lost someone, everybody's grieved, and everybody knows the sort of complexity and the, like, the depth and the, like, the hurt that goes along with grieving. And if you
Yeah.
pay attention to those lyrics, you're going to feel something, because
Yeah.
we've all grieved. And like, I just, that song is like, yeah, that song's broken me down more than a few times, and it's always like, but it always makes you feel better, It's like, if you have a good cry, you have a good, like, you get it
Exactly.
out.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. It's like, no, I'm on the verge of crying, but I can't. Let me just throw on "Still I Pray for You Now," and that way we get it out there, and like the sneeze is gone, and I feel better, and oh, now we can go
See,
about our day.
maybe I'm right. Maybe this was a therapy album. This was
Uh,
like maybe
yeah.
that's why I like it so much, because I'm in so much therapy.
Who is not nowadays? Like, if you're raw
Dude,
dogging life, well,
ugh,
a congrats, but also like, yeah, good for you. I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong if you're raw dogging life. I'm just saying you're a stronger person than I, because I have my medications and my therapies.
it is necessary for, I think, contemporary existence to be able
Yeah.
to navigate this world. It's it just helps to have somebody to talk to, or some things to get your levels into balance. We're all just trying to
Exactly.
find that balance.
Exactly. Well, and I'm glad that you took the time to talk to me today, Patrick, and tell me everything that I could have ever known and then some about Jon Oliva's Pain. I will cherish this with me for the rest of my life. And at some point, Patrick, there's going to be a trivia night that I'm at, that where this is going to come up, and I'm going to be like, "Yeah, I know this one. I know
I
it."
know I know everything about Savatage and Jon Oliva, Paul O'Neill and Criss Oliva. And yeah, it's good. It's the crazy thing is we only scratched the surface. Like, we could have gone. There's still so much more. Like,
Oh,
and
Jesus Christ.
that's again where, like, I love that story and that history and idea that Savatage was they've created a whole universe, and we just kind of looked into the very first layer of it.
Well, hell yeah. Maybe in a little while we can come back and do global warming, or we can listen to fucking, I don't know, fucking, I don't know. We can listen to Streets or something like that. I
I
don't
think I'm
know.
gonna make you listen to Streets because it's
Yeah.
gonna be a similar kind of ride.
Dude, I'm down. But so there it is. Jon Oliva's Pain with the fucking album Maniacal Renderings.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Any I know I was gonna say any last words, but I don't know what else you can
I think
say
we got
about
all
this
out.
one,
I'm out of
Patrick.
words. We
So
said it all.
in that case, this is what I'll do. I always like to ask people of their recommendations or first steps if someone either is like cursory into Savatage but hasn't like really given the album dive, or like listen to this and was like, I want to see what the actual band is about or whatever. Like, where would you recommend? Obviously, there's no right answers, but if someone were to come up to you and be like, hey, where should I start with Savatage and where should I go? What would you say with them?
It's got to be Hall of the Mountain King.
Yeah.
It's almost a perfect record, and it's a band that was sort of at the heights of their power, but also rebuilding, and you can feel how hungry they still were as a
Mhm.
band, but yet they'd achieved this maturity of songwriting. And Hall of the Mountain King is still, I think, one of the best '80s heavy metal records
Yeah.
that has ever existed.
Yeah, it's the one that I know the most from this band just because of like how big it is. So
Yeah, there's a
if
reason.
people have heard Hall of the Mountain King and haven't got around to the next one, where would you say they go after that?
So that's the thing with Sabotage. You got to choose your path wisely.
Oh boy.
If you want more of the sort of like aggressive, percussive, really like awesome guitar playing and a little bit more you know, street attitude, go backwards.
Okay.
Go back to Power of the Night. Even Sirens. I mean, the debut is an awesome record in
Dude,
its
that
own
title
right.
track is fucking great.
Yeah, it's just like again, like I'm so impressed at how mature that band was at their first record, which it came from another band which was called Avatar. We didn't even get into that. We
Yeah.
won't. But like if you appreciate some of the more theatrical elements of All the Mountain King, I would go to Gutter Ballet because that's where it becomes more fully realized, the sort of theatricality in their sound. And
Mhm.
then if you're really looking to dive in deep and you want to get to my level of nerdery,
Go
Streets.
Streets.
Streets,
Maybe
a
Edge of
rock opera.
Thorns before going into Streets just to,
You know, you
no?
can you can get to Edge of Thorns if you want to get some of the Zach Stevens flavor in there, but I go right to Streets.
There you go. I've had Edge of Thorns stuck in my head as I've been like kind of like perusing Sabotage the past couple of weeks.
Catchiest
Edge
song.
of
So
Thorns.
good.
So
It's
good.
so good. One of the
Uh,
best singles they've ever released for sure.
yeah, it's just it's in my like all-time heavy metal playlist. So what are you
Hell
gonna
yeah.
do?
I agree.
Okay, the last question I have for you, Patrick, and then you can
Yeah.
go about your day. Obviously, so as we're talking, Cult of the Serpent Sun is going to be out by the time this episode is over.
It's
It'll
out
be
now.
It's out
While you're
now.
in this.
We're in the future.
Go listen to it.
Go listen to it, everybody. It's out. I'll have the links and everything like that for you, Bandcamp, merch, all this shit, for you, dear listener, YouTube comments or Spotify description. I'm curious, just to wrap up, what are you most excited for people to hear about this album, and what would you like them to take away from it when they listen to it?
I would love that people would first watch the video for Crow Fear the Night because it's the best video that we've ever done. And it's
Yeah.
also it's gotten the most views and streams of anything we've ever produced. I mean, within the first week we had, over 150,000, views on YouTube, which for a band
So
of
cool.
our
Yeah, dude, I'm so
size and
fucking proud
caliber,
of you guys. Like, congratulations.
it's a
Awesome,
thank you so
dude.
much. And that's all our friend Marcel, who produced and directed the video. She's an amazing artist. She's also in a band called Vorlust that she sings and plays bass for, and our bassist Avinash plays drums in
Writing this down.
Vorlust. Definitely worth
Yeah.
checking out. Um, but yeah, I would say listen to the record, check out the video, and then keep an eye out for our touring schedule because we're touring to support this record, and we're definitely hitting markets we have not yet hit. And
Yeah.
so we will be on the East Coast. This is now that we're in the future. This has already been announced.
Mhm.
We're touring the East Coast with our good friends Savage Master.
Yes,
Fucking
who also have an album coming out very, very soon as well. And it's so far the singles I've heard from it are great. But that band's
there's
great, and I like that band. So I'm gonna like everything that they put out mostly.
they're some of our best friends, and they're one of the best live bands playing today. I mean, talk about theater.
Yeah.
You're transported right to that 1970s Hammer horror Dracula film, and you are being a sacrificial blood virgin for Savage Master. So we're so excited to be able to hit the road with them. Great people, killer band. I think it's a really good pairing, and we're going to be on the East Coast, which we've only, as a band from California, it's obviously much easier for us to tour the West. We've only toured the western half of the U.S.
Hmm.
We'll be in the East Coast, so keep an eye out for those dates.
Fuck yes, I will have that in the episode description. So that is your warning, everybody, if you're in anywhere on the East Coast, because you can get to there. If you're on the Acela line, you better be going to a fucking Nite show.
Easy.
Or else. So yeah, Patrick, it was so good to talk with you, to meet with you, and just nerd out about Savatage and heavy metal, Nite, and fucking cheesy theatric heavy metal music, dude.
All day long. I love it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. That was a Savatage and Jon Oliva knowledge bomb dropped on your noggin, courtesy of Nite's Patrick Crawford. Massive thanks to him for lending his time to listen to a record with me on Spinning the Wax, and I hope you had as much fun listening to all those ridiculous stories as I did. We probably could have gone for like 2 or 3 hours more. You now know so much about Jon's flaws, about Criss Oliva's untimely death, how this band has tinkered with the strings of rock and roll history beneath our very eyes. Definitely go check out Nite's new album, Cult of the Serpent Sun, which is available everywhere right now via Season of Mist. It really is a grower. It gets better with every listen, and it's probably been one of my most spun records this year, just because of how easy it is to spin over and over again, how fun the songs are, and just how much they nailed the sequencing and the album experience that Patrick was alluded to. Granted, black metal vocals over 80s heavy metal, Iron Maiden, Savatage, Judas Priest, all of it speaks to my soul. But hey, if that sounds like a good thing for you, go check them out. Go listen to Voices of the Cronian Moon. They're a great fucking band. If you like this video, please give the little thumbs up guy a click. And if you really like this, please subscribe to the channel. We have new episodes of Spinning the Wax coming every other week, and new other videos coming to boot. I am constantly working to get passionate and creative musicians on the show to talk about their favorite records. Let me know who you'd like to see on the show by leaving a comment below or a review on Spotify or Apple. I almost said Spodcast, but you know what I mean. Spotify or Apple Music, those reviews really, really help us. And also, if you can spread the word through word of mouth, a friend of yours that happens to like metal, that is a major thing for us as well. You can also hit me up at spinningthewax@gmail.com to send me all of your stories about Jon Oliva, of Savatage, of Nite, or you can hit us up on socials at Spinning the Wax. Please also consider heading over to patreon.com/spinningthewax to support the show directly. We are an independent venture, and anything you can do to support us is massively huge for us. Massively huge. You'll get early access to all of these episodes, exclusive content just for Patreon, new music updates every week, as well as an alternate version of the show where the full album listen portion is played unedited so that you can sync the album and listen like you're in the room with us. Otherwise, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for your support so far. We will be back in 2 weeks with Vancouver Gothic doom metal band Tribunal as their 2 main members get slow and sad with an album from My Dying Bride. Until then, my friends, stay safe, stay sane, stay heavy, stay puffed. We'll see you on the other side.